Adriana Vargas, Pavement Preservation in Urban Settings.
All right, good morning. My name is Adriana Vargas. I'm with NCAT, National Center for Asphalt Technology in Auburn. And the project that I'm going to be talking about today is about pavement preservation in urban environments. And Jason Dietz referred to it briefly earlier during his presentation. So this is something that we're working on for Federal Highway. And just to talk about the motivation behind this project, we recognize that urban roads, as opposed to rural or open highways or interstate, have additional elements that may be different and may or may not affect the way we plan and execute our projects. So, for example, things like curb and gutter, sidewalks, ADA ramps, signal loops, having a higher density of utilities, all of that could really come into play when we have a project in an urban setting. And these different elements may impact not only the vehicles that are going to be driving on that road, but also it could be cyclists or pedestrians. We could have public transportation facilities, residents, businesses, all of those. So they could have a significant effect on how long it takes to complete the project, the cost, environmental considerations, any of those. So the idea behind this project, the objective, was to consolidate and document the latest information on pavement preservation in an urban environment for both rigid and flexible pavements. And we are doing this right now, as Jason said, it's ongoing, but we're achieving this through literature and practice review, identifying factors and their impact level. We're doing case studies, compiling and putting all of the documents that go along with this project, and also developing webinars on the subject. The treatments that we're considering under this, that will be chip seals, slurry treatments, so slurry seals, microsurfacing, cape seals. We have crack sealing and filling, thin asphalt overlays, recycle-based techniques as well, and also for the rigid pavements, patching, diamond grinding, that sort of thing. Our research team, this is being led by ARA, Applied Research Associates. So Sri Rao is the project manager. We have Letha as the technical editor, and Lisa is taking care of us being 508 compliant with the deliverables. On NCAT side, I'm the PI, and we also have Travis Wolbeck as a subject matter expert. And we also have the Transtech group. Kiran Mohan-Rush is another subject matter expert, and we also have California State University at Chico, with Ding also participating as an expert there. So the nice thing about this is that we have a team that is active throughout the country, from coast to coast, basically. So each of us can reach out to different people within our areas and get a better information with this. So starting with the literature and practice review, as expected, a lot of this information is not published. There may be a quick reference here and there in some report, but something specifically for urban environments is really very limited, the type of information that we could find. So we're relying heavily on interactions with owner agencies, with contractors, practitioners, basically talking to people and seeing what their experiences are. We've been reaching out to different stakeholders, so we've been talking to different members of the pavement preservation partnerships, the different regions, also through the TRB Committee on Pavement Preservation, PPRA that Scott Metcalf talked about yesterday, FP2 also. We reached out to MTC as well, Bay Area, a lot of 109 agencies that they oversee, a lot of those with very heavy urban environments. So those are just some of the stakeholders, but we've really talked to a lot of people. We have conducted, I think, approximately 22 interviews with various stakeholders. Some of those are in this room today. So we talked to Kim, we talked to Jerry Dankbar, talked to Scott Gibson, for example. just among the few of those. We talked to state agencies, local agencies as well, because I think they have a big part of this. Just contractors, different organizations. We try to get different perspectives here. And some of the things that we wanted to touch up on during those conversations, so we try to make it more like a conversation rather than a survey where we just check a box like yes or no. So we talked about, well, what treatments they used in their areas. Is there any treatment that's not allowed or that they just don't want to do in an urban setting? What's the most effective treatment if you're in an urban environment? Most importantly, what are the challenges when you're doing preservation in an urban environment? How does that affect your project selection, if it does? What factors may impact just how different it is to do pavement preservation in an urban environment? And if you have to use any mitigation measures, what those are they outlined in a document? Are there any specific examples that they could share with us? So all of those things, we schedule like 30-minute interviews. Sometimes we'll go as far as an hour, and it's just provided really interesting conversations while we were doing this. So from all of that, some of the issues that we identify, well, first of all, communication. That just is fundamental part of doing pavement preservation in an urban environment. You want the public to be informed and know what's happening. That just helps. But not only that, also communication between everyone involved. And a lot of that was educating elected officials so they can communicate with the public, because sometimes they're going to be the ones receiving the calls and things like that. So that was really, really a fundamental part of that. And also Scott talked about that yesterday with all the resources and the outreach that needs to be done for the projects. Traffic control was another big one for most people. And another thing was production rates. So it is expected that you're not going to be as effective when you're doing preservation in the urban environment. There's a lot of prepping that goes with that. You probably have to go out and cover utilities and things of that nature, so you're going to be a little slower. ADA compliance, I've heard that yesterday quite a bit. So if you have to update your ramps, that just means additional money that you're going to have to spend. So it was a big deal, but it didn't necessarily play a role into people saying we can't do this because of the money that we have to spend updating our ramps. So they just had to kind of bite the bullet in there and just move forward. And another issue that I don't think this is necessarily specific to the urban environment, but we heard it mentioned more than once, was shortages on personnel and resources and how that was affecting what everyone was doing. Some of the non-issues that we identified, and some of these I thought were going to be a bigger deal that they actually were. So for example, there were no treatments that were banned, to put it that way, in an urban environment. I expected to hear a lot of people saying we will never do a chip seal in an urban environment, but that wasn't necessarily the case. And a lot of that was, there's a lot of people doing cape seals, so they're still having to do a chip seal, and at some point during that first stage, that chip seal is what you got in there. So we're going back to the communication and letting people know this is a multi-step process. This is not your finished surface. This is how it's done. And then people tend to be more understanding. So we didn't really hear of anyone just saying they wouldn't do something in an urban environment, a specific treatment. The environmental factors like noise or air quality or stormwater didn't turn out to be a big issue. Noise, for example, most of the agencies that we talked to, they would be working during the day, so that didn't really affect them as far as keeping it down. Air quality, we didn't have anything that was too dusty or that will affect in that regard. The only comment was probably for the core recycling, and if you're going to use cement, as an additive, then some of the people that we talk to say, well, we'll use it as apply it as a slurry, so we don't have just all that cement flying around. But again, were things that could be overcome. There wasn't anything too tragic about that. Cost, so there's a big footnote on that, because cost is always an issue. But our question was more towards, do you see higher cost when you have to do preservation projects in an urban setting? And most agencies, they didn't really see it that way, because they're bundling different projects and maybe having a mix of urban and rural. So at the end of the day, they just get a price and that's it. Contractors obviously didn't really touch more and get into more detail on that, but so it didn't seem to really be an issue. And aside from the ADA upgrades, it didn't really mean much in terms of obstacles. So we've done the interviews, but we also wanted to see how things were being done and be part of the action. So we program also to have field visits as part of this project. And our idea is to do at least 4, so we can cover all the different regions of the preservation partnerships. And that gives us an opportunity to engage with the agencies and the contractors and see how they both interact during the project, and just see what that interaction is. And we can gather more information, more visual aids. We've already completed a visit in Durham in North Carolina, and we're going to Roseville next week. See Jerry walking out. We're going to Minneapolis also this fall. So we have the projects lined up. We've completed one so far. So as we gather all this information, the part of the research and the development effort, with all of the information, once that we have it, our objective is to identify, well, what factors are the most influential and what could be more critical when we're doing this type of project. And we are assessing that based on pavement type, so for flexible and rigid, and for different functional classifications. So we're going to have the interstates, arterials, collectors, and residentials. And our goal is to have a table kind of like this, where you have the different items or the different potential issues. And we will have all of the treatments for a given surface type and a given functional classification. And we can sort of, I don't know, let's say color-code it or put some kind of scale, whether that impact of that specific issue is going to be a low impact or a high impact, or it doesn't really apply to that at all. So that's a quick reference for anyone who wants to look into that. And later on within the document, you can see, well, this is a high impact. So this is why it is that it's classified that way, and these are the things that could be done to minimize or mitigate that. We're also doing case studies, so the field visits could be the case study, but we're proposing 6 of those, so we'll need additional, could be projects that have already been completed. We expect that there's going to be significant overlap in some of the things that we want to see. So we want to include at least a project that has a rigid pavement, one that's in an urban major highway or interstate, one that has a complete settings environment, and it could be that one project has multiple of these. We want to touch up on the different areas or regions of the pavement preservation partnerships and have the different climate zones. And one project where there's removal and application of pavement marking. So again, it could be that one case study will touch up on several of these. And just to give you a preview of what we saw during our visit to Durham, that city has approximately 1,500 lane miles, and it's mostly flexible and composite pavements, and it's heavily residential, so approximately 90% of it is residential. Their annual budget is $10 million, and half of that goes to pavement preservation. Their PCI is 69, so they do automated surveys every 3 years. And even with that money that they have, that's only half of what they would need to keep the current state of their roadways. So they have to be very strategic and smart about what they do. The treatments that they use crack seal, rejuvenator seals, microsurfacing, cape seals. They're looking to do their first hot-in-place recycling project, but they haven't really done it yet. So they're very open to innovations and all of that, but just want to take it slow and make sure they're successful so they don't end up with something that, that doesn't work well and then it's banned forever. Some of the interesting policies that they have, they do use crack seal, but they don't leave it exposed. They always do it in combination with other treatments, and this is purely aesthetics. So they always do crack seal, but they cover it with something else. They work on entire neighborhoods at a time, and I think that's just to avoid conflict. So nobody's going to be like, well, my street got something, and then the other street got something different, or my street didn't get a treatment, and the next street got something. So even if the pavement management system doesn't necessarily call for the same thing on the same year, they will bundle it all, and I think that's smart and cost-effective. They said before they set up their organization the way they have it right now, they will just go with what the system said. So it could be that the street needs a micro and the next one a thin overlay, and they will just do it that way. And they would just never hear the end of it from all the residents. Their work hours are 7 to 7. They don't do night work, and they don't do Sundays. And another interesting thing is that their payment management system has an equity component to it. So I thought that was interesting. They do a very good job with public notifications. Again, that's very crucial for the success of their program. The city and the contractor work together to inform users of all the work that they're doing. So because they're so residential, they have to communicate a lot with the HOA. So they start holding meetings with them like weeks in advance. They send out notifications by mail, door hangers. They have a web page. They put the link on the communications that they send, and you can visit that and see live what is being done at a certain time. And they just educate the public and elected officials. So they really do a good job with their public outreach. So when we were there, we got to see some of the microsurfacing work being done. Because it's so residential, there were so many cul-de-sacs on the streets, and that means a lot of handwork that has to be done, so that could maybe, again, complicate things a little bit or give you a slower production rate. Traffic control is complicated also when they're working on these neighborhoods and you have multiple streets being done at the same time, so they just kind of put up cones and move on. You can't just have a flagger on every street. So that we'll see in a few slides. But just giving access to driveways and things like that could be a little more complicated. And of course, the day we visited, it had rained, so they had to postpone. We went to the job site the next day. It turned out to be garbage pickup day, of course. So a lot of things happening at the same time, everybody trying to stay away from everybody else's way. I'm sure that was a nightmare for the contractor, but it couldn't have worked better for us. So we can actually see all these types of challenges happening. So you can see there just the trucks trying to go past one another, the crew members getting the trash cans out of the way. It was wild. And even with all the notifications and all of that, there's always somebody that has to go over the freshly placed treatment, and it just kind of hurts my heart to see that. And we're like, oh, but it just happens. I think being so effective with communication at least minimizes these occurrences, but I don't think you can necessarily avoid them at all. So after we do visits like this, and we have a few more to complete, and then the case studies to complete, we're putting together a document. We are doing a handbook for planning and constructing pavement preservation projects in urban environments. And again, for each of the items, we'll explain why it is a challenge and give out recommendations. Well, I think Federal Highway doesn't like the recommendation word, so we'll give some thoughts on that. And we'll have the appendices with the tables that I showed you, and even an FAQ section at the end. And we're also developing content for 2 webinars. So one's going to be on the considerations in the planning stage when you're doing projects like these. And the other one's going to be more on construction and project management. And we'll just develop the content and line up the speakers and all of that good stuff. So for deliverables, not only will we have the final report, we're also going to have a tech brief with basically your key points outlined in there. So for final thoughts, well, I think our perception right now is that pavement preservation can be done successfully in an urban environment. It could be more challenging depending on the different elements that you see, but it shouldn't be something that keeps people from doing preservation in an urban setting. Communication seems to be essential, so that's basically the most important thing. And one of the variables that seem to affect how an item impacted just the execution of the project was traffic level and functional classification. So it's not the same to do it in a busy roadway than to be on a subdivision, for example. So the project's still underway. If you have some burning thoughts or burning questions, anything that you feel like, oh, I really need to share this with you, please, by all means, feel free to contact us. And with that, that's all I have.
Thanks, Adriana. Questions?
Thanks so much for that, Adriana. This is such an important component of pavement preservation because streets and highways are completely different things. And I hope that part of what comes out of this is just all the opportunities for complete streets and improving bicycle and pedestrian and safety in urban environments through pavement preservation processes. And I recommend getting in cities, it's the planners and the public works guys that don't talk to each other. And you go and talk to a city council person about pavement preservation and their knees get wobbly and their eyes roll back in their head. But if you talk to them about complete streets and safety and pedestrians and stuff, they get all excited. So if you can get planning guys on board and communicating and realize that they can fulfill their planning goals for complete streets through the pavement preservation process and get the public works guys realize they can get some funding for their underfunded programs by doing this, it's just such a win-win thing. And I suggest kind of finding those opportunities in this report to let people know that they can get a lot done that way.
All right, thank you.
And come see us.
Yes, absolutely.
Hi, Trudy Elsner with Hennepin County, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I feel like this is my whole job, trying to juggle all the different cities in Hennepin County, Minneapolis being the primary one. And the main problem I found is that our striping in the urban environment is like double what it is in the rural. And again, a lot of bike lanes and signage for that. So it's made a big difference in our planning because of the cost for that.
As Dave Peschke and I were just talking, excellent presentation as usual. Question I didn't see there is in the problems we see in the future is truck parking and contractor parking in highly densified urban, the ability to stage your equipment. I think I didn't see that up there as an issue, but I think on a contractor's perspective that is a huge issue.
Yes. So that's part of why we want to really target one of those case studies to be in a highly dense urbanized area and see how they're handling things like that.
And I didn't know if you guys looked at a definition of what high urban was. Is it density of residents? Is it?
We're thinking like a downtown area with lots of businesses and things like that. So we were looking at, for example, going to San Francisco or a city like those.
Yeah, San Francisco would be a great case study. We have some good information on that, so we can certainly share that with you.
Well, thank you, Adriana. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.